Morning, everyone. My name is Sterling Higa, Chairperson of the Authority. I'd now like to call to order the May 7th at-large Authority meeting of the Hawaii Community Development Authority. The time is now 10 a.m.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with section 92-3.7 Hawaii revised statutes, the Hawaii Community Development Authority is holding today's at-large board meeting virtually on Zoom. The Zoom link details were included on the meeting agenda. Therefore, members of the public are welcome to join us on Zoom and also at our physical meeting site at the American Brewery Building, 547 Queen Street, second floor boardroom, Honolulu, Hawaii, 96813. The HCDA communication staff is hosting this meeting. Once this meeting begins, everyone will be muted for clear audio. Board members, if you have any comments or questions, please unmute yourselves to speak. It is important that all individuals clearly state their name, pseudonym, or other identifier name each time prior to speaking. If you wish to provide oral testimony virtually, please indicate so by clicking the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. If you are attending in person, you will be called to the front of the room in order that you signed up. All testimony will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. Your testimony must be related to an item on the agenda. Before you begin your testimony, identify yourself and spell your name for the record. When 1 minute is remaining, 1 minute remains to be called out. When 30 seconds is remaining, 30 seconds remaining to be called out. When time is elapsed, time will be called and you have 30 seconds to conclude your testimony. And then your audio will be turned off. If you're attending in person, the presiding officer will call the next testifier. Keep in mind that this is an opportunity to share your thoughts with us. If you ask questions during your testimony, neither the board nor the staff is required to provide an answer. If the authority's connection for the remote meeting is lost, the meeting will be recessed until the connection is restored. If the connection cannot be restored within 30 minutes, the meeting will be terminated and the authority will continue the meeting at another notice date. Thank you. Chair.
Thank you, Director. HCDA board members, please remain visible and audible during the meeting. Also, please acknowledge you are present by either saying here or present. Let the record reflect that the following members are present. Vice Chair Ishii is excused. Secretary Lidstone.
You.
Thank you. Member Miranda Johnson is excused. Member Anderson. Thank you. Member Evans.
Present.
Thank you. Member Stripes. Here. Thank you. Member Yamashita. Yamashita is just joining the meeting. Yep. Member Hirakawa.
Here.
Thank you. Member China.
Here.
Thank you. Member Sakota.
Here.
Thank you. Member Gordner.
Here.
Thank you. Member Leong.
Here.
I don't see member Light. Member Light. And Mark is excused. Member Kabibi.
Yes.
Yes, there she is. And member Yamasaki.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Go back to member Yamashita.
Yep. Member Yamashita.
Yes, I am here and I just had a new computer installed, so I'm trying to not have
You're all good.
the sound come through the speaker so everybody else can hear. So anyway.
You're good. We hear you loud and clear.
Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce our newest board member, Ian Hirakawa. Member Hirakawa is an ex officio designee representing the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and he serves on the at-large board and the preliminary board. So welcome, Member Hirakawa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Awesome. For today's meeting, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments after an agenda item has been presented. Individuals from the public who have requested to provide verbal public testimony on a specific agenda item are on standby and will be permitted to provide their testimony respectively. Moving to agenda item number 2, the approval of minutes. These are the regular meeting minutes of April 2nd, 2025. Board members, are there any comments or corrections to these minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Agenda item number 3 for information and discussion. This is an information presentation and update by the HCDA staff regarding the state budget and the following bills: HB 300, HD1, SD1, HB 1007, HD2, and governor's messages 558, 559, 688, and 735. Mr. Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director, will now present the update.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to turn it over to Garrett Sasaki, our Chief Financial Officer, to speak on the state budget, HB 300 first, and then we'll go into the other bills.
Great, thank you. Morning, Chair, board members. On the operating budget for HCDA, it was relatively unchanged. We have 13 general funded positions, 12 special funded. One change is the addition of a general funded position for the 99-year leasehold program and other affordable housing projects that we are in progress or will be starting soon. Operating, that's where we're at. CIP on the screen, this is a list of the projects that were or that are in HB 300. The FY 26 total is 38 million, so that's a lot of work coming up once this final budget is approved. Just briefly going down line by line, 99-year leasehold program, got 15 million. That's the state contribution in that development. Below that is climate change impact assessment for 2 million. That's to cover Kaka'ako and Kalailoa. Below that is the Iwilei Kapalama CIP funds. This is primarily for planning and design of all offsite infrastructure to support mayor housing. Below that, kind of grouped together is Kaka'ako Makai geotechnical assessment and Makai planning. Our planning department is working on executing a contract for that work. Kalailo infrastructure EIS, $1 million. And the last item is Kupuna supportive housing. The first year is 5.5 million. And that's the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sasaki. Director?
Thank you. So let me take the easy ones first. All of the nominees were confirmed by the Senate Water and Land Committee and then were voted on in the Senate. So thank you, Member Gardner, Member Lidstone, Secretary Lidstone, Member Kabibi, and Member Gardner. Thank you for continuing to, be willing to serve on the HCDA board. Thank you.
And then let the record reflect that Member Light was present at 10:05 a.m.
So let me get down to HB 1007. So just quick background for all of you. This is was our administrative bill in the governor's package of bills. It was intended to be really simplification, housekeeping, primarily to allow the agency to assist other state and county agencies on different projects. The second was to kind of simplify that 4-county board structure for 206E Part 10, which is the TOD section. That 4-county board structure proved to be a little bit unwieldy. And so we were proposing to create a program whereby matters that need to be taken to a board for TOD are taken to the General Authority Board, the 17-member board. So it passed out of the House with some changes, but not anything substantial. But when it crossed over to the Senate, that's kind of where the challenge and the fun began. There were essentially 3 provisions added to HB 1007. One was to allow us to, the agency, to use our powers in areas outside of our community development districts. And in my perspective, that was consistent with the original intent of the bill, which was to help other county and state agencies, on projects. The second change was to add language that would allow us to issue bonds for community facilities districts, CFDs. And this was primarily for the stadium development. It was also for other TOD projects. And again, I think as an alternative method of financing infrastructure, it was something that was acceptable to us because I think we're gonna have to look at alternative means of financing if we're gonna develop infrastructure. It can't be just depending on legislative funding. The third change that was made on the Senate side was to add the provisions of Senate Bill 1669 into Senate Draft 1. And this was proposed by the Transportation Chair, the Senate Transportation Chair. Senate Bill 1669 was a wide-ranging bill that would have created a TOD partnership board under state DOT, but with a separate board, with a separate executive director and other things. That was eventually found to be non-germane, so that amendment would not have worked. So there were discussions to create a watered down version of SD1. So that what emerged as SD2 was a provision that still had a separate board under HCDA. It was kind of a board within a board. And I frankly still had some objections to that because of the way it was structured. I didn't feel like having a board under a board led to more efficient, government. It certainly didn't lead, I don't think it led to, faster execution of TOD projects. And I think the final point is that if that separate board were to take action on items, I would feel obligated to take it to this, the HCDA board for approval or not, because it comes under the HCDA board. So what emerged out of that as the conference draft 1 was that separate board got taken out of the bill, and what emerged is having 2 additional voting members on the HCDA board. These are 2 so-called TOD experts that are going to be appointed, one by the Senate President and one by the House Speaker. These are members that are not intended to be confirmed by the Senate. That wasn't my preference, because the rest of the board is confirmed by the Senate, but that was what emerged out of conference. The second board change was to add 4 ex officio non-voting members. These are the Senate and House Transportation and Housing chairs. Okay. So the structure that it creates, while still a little bit cumbersome, was better than the previous one. And as many of you know, legislation is kind of the art of compromise, and this was a compromise over several iterations of it, with the respective chairs. So what it creates is going to be a separate general authority board consisting of the 2 so-called TOD experts and the 4 ex officio members to just vote on matters that are related to 206E Part 10, or what I would call the Part 10 board. The regular general authority board, without those ex officio members and the 2 TOD experts, would vote on and approve matters that they approve on now, like approve audit, evaluate the executive director, approve matters related to the 99-year leasehold program. We didn't want to get those boards mixed up where you had TOD experts and then you had ex officio members looking at things that are more germane to the regular board. One of the things that are mentioned in the preamble on page 7 of the bill is that and there was a lot of language in the original preamble that we took out. Some of the language was concerning, and it was concerning and some not accurate. So we got some of that taken out. But what remained was on page 7 of the preamble that the legislature finds that HCDA may begin to employ these new strategies and use these new tools by quote, assisting with the planning, development and implementation of the proposed park and ride transit and community hub adjacent to the Skylines Waiawa Pearl Highlands Station on Oahu. So that's a big ask and a big add. I'll note that this HB 1007 does not have positions in it, you know, in this version. I think for next session, we'll do some internal analysis and determine how many additional positions we might need and make that ask. I think it's fair. In this bill, it also does not have any funding for this work. What I'm told by Transportation Chair, Senate Transportation Chair, that there's another bill where there's some sort of funding, but I haven't seen which bill that is just yet. So that's sort of the history of the bill. You know, I wanted to really call out Member Evans in her, role at OPSD for being with us at every step of the way on this and providing input, not only on 1669, but providing input on 1007. Really, thank you, Member Evans, for going out of your way to provide that input. And then I wanted to thank the staff for everything in this legislative session. Ryan, Garrett, Francine, Tommy Lynn, Charlene and Martin in Ryan's staff, our main, the ASO staff, Kevin Tong, our able Deputy Assistant Attorney General, for all their help, the ASO staff for, giving us rights to the Capitol, and of course, Member Evans for all their help. It was a challenging session, I think more challenging than others, but I think we came through okay. At least with the key bill, and the key bill was getting 1007 passed for a lot of reasons. There were a lot of stakeholders who wanted to see 1007 passed, and we got it passed with a little bit of compromise. And I think with the minimal impact to the agency is my view of it. But thank you, board members, and open to questions, Garrett and me. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, comments or questions for Director Nakamoto or staff? Yes, Member Strikes.
Thanks for that update. I just wanted to get clarification, what you mentioned on HB 1007 not having funding for the work. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so the one immediate sort of directive and suggestion is that we kind of assist with the transit hub at Park and Ride at the Waiawa Pearl Highlands, and there is no money in this bill to help with that effort, is what I meant.
Oh, okay. And then on the CIP, you mentioned the Ibilek Kapalama infrastructure support going for Mayor Wright housing. I was curious if that was intended to, or any of the CIP projects, either currently in the budget or future, would be following the HB 1007 process. Because as you know, the city has got a big project itself across the street from Mayor Wright, and we really need to have strong coordination on the infrastructure upgrades over there.
Yes, okay, so the Evelay CIP request come out of the HHFTC infrastructure master plan. So we're, getting projects that are more ready to go from that plan and asking for funding for it. And that's our process.
To Member Strikes' question though, that's not being administered under section 10.
Part 10, yeah.
Part 10, sorry.
It really should be administered under Part 10 because that is TOD.
So when these funds are released, there will be a request to that board to authorize executive director to contract and expend.
Okay. And then I guess going to the revenue bonds of House Bill 1007, I guess, it's early, but do you have any sort of plans as vague as they might be at this point, or, like majority going to stadium, or like what that process would look like and how that, intersects with, the city work on utilities?
Yeah, member Straits, let me answer the question by going back to Evile Kapalama too. I mean, the 12 million that, we have is a small part of what's needed for Evile Kapalama. In the original, in the Senate version of the budget, there was an additional 50 million for the second year of the biennium, but that got taken out, I think, in compromise for other things. To tie it into your question about bonds, I mean, I think we're gonna have to look at Evile Kapalama in the lens of how are we gonna finance, those infrastructure improvements in Evile Kapalama. I mean, we're gonna have to look at some other means of financing. And as far as, sort of what our plans are with bond proceeds, if in 1007, I forgot to mention that there is a bond ceiling cap of $180 million. That $180 million bond ceiling cap it didn't originate from HCDA. It originated from Stadium Authority. And I think it's intended to be primarily for the stadium project. That's my understanding. So if we're gonna undertake other projects that involve bond financing, I think we're gonna have to go back to the legislature for additional bond ceiling. And I think member Straits, and this is one of the strategic plan goals that I internally, staff-wise, I think we need to get ramped up a little bit more on the bond issuance process, including underwriting, work with BNF, and then bring somebody from BNF to kind of to the board to inform about the bond proceed issuance. Because for me, I don't have enough knowledge to speak intelligently or comfortably on how the mechanics of a bond process issuance is gonna work. So I'll have to get that kind of knowledge.
Okay, and just for, I guess, my clarification too, it would be helpful to know like whether those bonds would be intended to serve just state properties or kind of the broader TOD areas, because, Garrett, you mentioned, at least for the CIP project in Evile Kapalama, that just supporting Mayor Wright, but, when you're talking about CFDs, if that's intended to be kind of part of the broader neighborhood or just defined around the state properties, if that would even work. And then of course, as you know, just from the Evile infrastructure master plan, there's more to the neighborhood than just state properties, and city provides infrastructure now, with HCDA getting into the game. I think, we got to make sure that when we do go in there, kind of like a dig once strategy, and also ensuring that it's the capacity supports the broader neighborhood development as well.
Understood. And with the new perspective, 1007, we're right at the beginning, so no definitive answers right now, but that is part of the strategic plan and the goals moving forward.
And I think
for the larger community area.
And then member Straits to kind of go back to what, Garrett mentioned. I mean, for Evile Kapalama, I think our playbook for implementation is the HHFDC's infrastructure master plan. I mean, it's a little bit dated right now and probably needs to be updated, but that's our sort of playbook and Bible for infrastructure in Evile Kapalama. And it does, I think, when it was done, the estimated price cost for all of the infrastructure in Evile Kapalama was something like $600 or $700 million. And it included drainage improvements, which are not just benefit state or county land, but benefit everybody in the district. And while I may be speaking out of turn, but I think the solution to Evile Kapalama is going to have to be a more regional district approach, and especially as to financing. How are we going to do that? I don't think the legislature has the capacity, I mean, to fund all of it. Because Mary Evans's department, did a kind of a study, through a consultant on different means of financing, including TIF, CFDs and other things. So we're gonna have to pull all those levers if we want to implement on infrastructure, people like Kapalama. Your point, so.
Yeah.
I hope that helps members.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, you know, to your point about the maybe outdated infrastructure master plan, luckily, you know, the city was able to be awarded the grant from OPST for the TOD planning in that area. So I think that might help inform updates to the master plan and hopefully, you know, kind of the supporting of the broader neighborhood. We had also been notified of an award from the FTA grant that, as part of that, included transportation and land use master planning, as well as how to actually bring that master plan to the next step for implementation, figuring out, you know, who does what, when, and so forth. But we haven't got word that those funds will actually be released yet. But at least we do have some funding for master planning, and hopefully being able to, you know, give you some updated numbers of infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think, if I can also note, you know, it's gonna require, you know, I know city is doing some, you know, some things in even like Kapalama now, you know, expanding funds. But I think it's gonna require, you know, contributions from, you know, city as well, from utility companies to contribute to all that. It's all part of that. I mean, it's not, it cannot be just a state effort. It's not, but I'm just saying it can't be a completely solely a state effort.
Yeah, I think the key will be that we're just not going in parallel directions, but, you know, I mean, working together in that direction.
But I appreciate it, Member Strikes. Like, having you on the board here is gonna be helpful to collaborate on that.
Thank you, Member Strikes. Members, any other comments or questions for Director Nakamoto or the staff? I'll just make a general comment, and this is primarily for the benefit of some of the newer members. I would highly advise reading the text of HB 1007. There are three fairly significant. They're not structural shifts, they're more a ratification of shifts that were already in progress. The first shift is moving HCDA toward being a TOD focused agency. And obviously, we already have the authority that was established in the 2023 session. But this amendment to that Part 10 really is going to allow us to set up that TOD board and to start being more effective in that area. The second structural shift is the movement toward helping other agencies, which this is a pretty clear indication that we are continuing to move in that direction, which is noted in our strategic plan as one of our goals. And the third big shift is reactivating the dormant bond capacity of HCDA. So this is not a new thing for HCDA to issue revenue bonds. In fact, one of the express purposes when the agency was created in 1976 was to issue revenue bonds for the development of infrastructure. However, it has been a capacity that has been dormant for quite some time. So it's incumbent on all of us as board members to appreciate where we're going as an agency, which relates to the strategic plan that we're going to talk about next. But it's also important for us to bone up, just as the agency must bone up on some of this bond financing technical knowledge, because we as board members are ultimately responsible for approving some of those weighty financial decisions for the taxpayers of Hawaii that will have to bear the cost of all the decisions we make. So my advice to the board members is there are many bills passed at the ledge this year. This is one that we should all read and understand.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those comments. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's a shift, but I think it's a direction that the agency is going away from just community development districts to more project work. I think the editorial in the Star Advertiser kind of talked about this as the bonus bill. And it does do all that. Well, again, thanks to the board for their support, and also the staff that I mentioned for everything that they've done to, you know, help with the legislative session.
Yes. Board members, seeing no comments or questions, we'll move to public testimony. Do we have any persons pre-signed up for testimony? Any persons present or online who wish to provide testimony? Seeing none, we will close public testimony. Board members, any other comments or questions on the legislative update? Seeing none, we'll move to agenda item or the third. This is findings and recommendations of the permitted interaction group established at the March 5th, 2025 at-large board meeting pursuant to section 92-2.5B Hawaii revised statutes for the purpose of 1, conducting the executive director's annual performance review, and 2, establishing the executive director's new 1, 3, and 5-year goals and accordingly amend the agency's strategic plan adopted by the authority at the June 5th, 2024 general authority meeting. The authority may convene an executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A2 to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee or of charge brought against the officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved, provided that if the individual concerned requests an open meeting shall be held. Mr. Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director, will now present the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Direct your attention to tab 3 in your packet that contains the staff report of the permitted interaction group and also on the revised strategic plan. This is the second of 3 public meetings for this matter. The first being the establishment, this one being the informational meeting, and then the third being the adoption and action by the board to accept the recommendations of the permitted interaction group and to accept the revised strategic plan that sets forth the revised 1, 3, and 5-year goals for the agency. The PIG met on April 9th, 2025. The staff provided the PIG members with a matrix of the goals that were achieved, goals that were partially achieved, and goals that were ongoing. So the board reviewed those matters. So to the strategic plan, the revised strategic plan, it incorporates feedback from the permitted interaction group, the revised goals for this next year. It also provides the goals related to the funding that Garrett went through under HB 300, which of course are subject to governor's review. And then the carryover goals from the previous year that either we've changed or we have carried over because we either partially achieved it or did not achieve those goals. And what you see in the strategic plan really is a kind of an aggressive goals that we've laid out for the year. I believe that they're aggressive and we're gonna strive to meet all of those goals the best we can, given the other kind of the workload demands and other work that we have for the agency. But I think they represent reasonable goals that can be achieved. I can walk through some of them, Chair, or if there's any questions, I can open to questions along with Garrett.
Members, comments or questions, primarily on the strategic plan? Yes, on the strategic plan, which is included in your board packet. Member Strikes.
Thanks, Chair. I guess this is more for the PIG group. I wasn't sure, but I saw the mention of the consideration of the state budget as being incorporated into the goals. So I wasn't sure if that was something new that we're going towards or not, and whether it makes sense, if so, to kind of try to shift the formation of this strategic plan review till after the budget or legislature session ends.
Yeah, the inclusion of, it kind of all, it happens just because of the timing of my anniversary date relative to the final review of the budget by the governor. So it's just the timing of how it works out. So in the past, member strikes, we have included as goals the funding for projects that are in the state budget, but may not yet be, approved by the governor. I think for discussion purposes, I think I would suggest that we include them in the strategic plan, and then if we have to take them out and modify it because of the governor's final action on the budget, we can modify it at that time, but just for discussion purposes, we wanted to give the board members the whole universe of goals.
If I can also comment, usually we do the executive director review in tandem with the strategic plan update. And because the executive director review has to be completed around this time, it ends up sort of just not neatly being, if we could shift things like 2 months later, then everything would be perfect, but it is what it is. Okay, thanks.
Member Straits, does that help?
Yeah.
Members, any other comments or questions on the strategic plan? Okay, if we convene. Oh, sorry, yes, member Yamashita, please.
Yeah, I just had a question about one of the projects, even though I'm representing Maui, but I had a question about the Kaka'ako Makai planning. I just am curious about the relationship of this to, does this cover the Kamehameha properties? Or
Thank you, member Yamashita. So, the Makai area of the Kakako Community Development District does cover that general area between Kiwalo Basin, Forest Avenue, Ala Moana Boulevard, and the ocean. And it does include, the planning or the planning area includes land holdings of Kamehameha schools. Also includes land holdings by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, as well as land that we own, HCDA owns. Also includes lands that are leased to the University of Hawaii.
so I guess given the kind of difference of opinion, I guess, in how the Hawaiian Homeland's property needs to be developed, is this going to be an attempt to provide a reconciled version or a compromised version? Or I'm just curious about this.
So, member Yamashita, let me kind of unpack that one a little bit. So, one, I'm not sure there's a difference of opinion. Right now, the only opinion that really counts is that the law prohibits bans residential development in the Makai area. You mentioned DHHL, but there's no DHHL owned lands in the Makai area. It's the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. The overarching reason for the Makai planning effort is the last time we did a amendment to the Makai area rules was in 2023. And it was largely to conform the Makai rules, simplify the permits for the Makai rules consistent with MALCA. It was also to kind of simplify some of the land uses, but largely more ministerial. It didn't examine the land uses. Since that time in 2023, there's been a lot more attention focused on the Makai area, and it's not just about the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I don't want to make it seem a focus, really. It's about the legislature's kind of focusing on the Makai area, the discussions that have been had at the legislature, and then the desire on our part to engage in a community planning effort that looks at different land uses for the Makai area. For example, while we were doing the 2023 sort of minor amendment to the Makai rules, the thought about hotels was brought up for the Makai area. And we did not include that in because I think, adding that would have required a little more study. There's also been discussions about more healthcare uses down in Makai. And I think all those things should be studied in the context of the data that we get, the history of Mackay, the environmental hazards that are in Mackay, the soil conditions in Mackay, the sea level rise, not the least of which is a big issue, sea level rise and community sentiment too, what people want to see in Mackay. I think there's still a little bit of a strong sentiment for not having residential and keeping it the way it is. Also, since the last time we did some planning for Mackay back in 2007 through the community planning group, there's been a lot of changes in Mackay. Member Yamashita, again, sea level rise is on the forefront. The land ownership in Mackay has changed considerably. There was a time when we, the agency, owned all the parks in Mackay and also some roads there. But since that time, parks have gone over to city and county. Also, the land that the land holdings we had in Mackay went to the Office of Foreign Affairs in 2012 as part of a settlement. And so there's been considerable land ownership changes there that I think in my mind, and I think in the agency's mind, warranted a deeper dive into planning. So it's not just a difference of opinion, members Yamashita, and it's really about OHA owned lands, county owned lands, and HCDA owned lands as well, and Kamehameha schools, not DHHL.
Okay, that's fine. No, thanks for the explanation.
Thank you, member Yamashita. Members, any other comments or questions on the strategic plan? Yes, member Strikes.
Just one more, so this was developed with HCA staff?
What is that?
The strategic
The
plan.
strategic plan?
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I guess, because I saw a lot of high priority items, that seems manageable then?
I think that goes to what I described as aggressive. Partly aggressive to the high priority and to the number. I think with some of the high priority items, what it does reflect, member Strikes, is the sentiment that I keep hearing at the legislature. Even though for some of these, we have a little bit longer ramp for CIP money to encumber it and do all those things, there's still a sentiment at the legislature that we should be moving quicker to implement some of these projects. So that's the reason for the high priority. Now, that said, we're going to try our best to give it the high priority effort and to implement. If we don't, then we'll report back to the board, as a status on that. But that's the reason for the high priority status on some of these. Conversely, we put some low priority items where it's not that time critical.
And member Strikes, there's always a tension between ambitions and capacity. I think, however, the HCDA staff, it's fewer than 24 people, does an incredible job at handling this work. And so as long as they keep doing a great job of handling the workload, people will keep expecting them to do more work. As we know, the reward for good work is more work.
Chair.
Member Evans.
I'd like to thank the Permitted Interaction Group for including in the strategic plan planning work on infrastructure for the various districts and the additional areas that the legislature has indicated they have a high priority for having HCDA help with. I think as we know with the TOD Council, lack of infrastructure is holding back building, housing in new communities around transit corridors, and this ability to do more work on infrastructure is something we wanted the city to also look at. For Ely Kapalama will move the governor's goal for more housing forward faster.
Thank you, Member Evans. And if I can add something, I think, this version of 1007, unlike prior versions, which look to kind of circumvent TOD interagency council, this version does not do that. So TOD interagency council, OPSD, as part of that framework for development of TOD still remains, and that's what we're going to rely on. Office of Planning for planning, TOD interagency council to prioritize TOD projects and then implement. Did that make sense on that one? Remember, Evan?
I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that the city is a very active
Right.
participant in the TOD council,
Correct.
all 4 counties.
All for counts, and as well as private sector.
Yes.
So that structure remains intact. It didn't in prior versions of 1007. That was one of the objections that I think you and I had.
Thank you, members. Members, any other comments or questions on the strategic plan?
Member Gordon.
Member Gordner, please.
I do. I want to first thank the staff for incorporating my request as a mid-year objective to review the Kailoa Development District Reserved Housing Rules based on a conversation that we've all had about those. So thank you very much for incorporating that. And I just want to note 2 small things. The first is on the first page of goals, priorities, and strategies, the short-term bond issuance and formation of community facilities districts. I think we alternate between target phase and phase in here, but this is a short-term objective and the phase is said to be complete. So I just want to clarify, board members, now that the pending legislation is through, we will be receiving an informational session on the mechanics and process of issuing bonds and a plan to implement CFDs this year, and that has not already been completed.
Yeah, so
Okay, very good.
Thank you for noting that. So we'll go through this, and I notice now that we do kind of alternate between phase and target phase, so we'll make that change throughout. I think this is one of those that we'll make a change, although it's still pending legislation until the governor signs it.
True.
But if the governor signs it, and hopefully he does, then we will provide that briefing to the board.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I just want to note it, particularly because it's marked as a low priority, but it is something that we just talked about in our discussion of 1007. And the other one is even smaller. On page 9, the first bullet point, there's an extra O in the word improvements. So if you wouldn't mind correcting that typo before the final product. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gardner. And to the low priority, I think just to balance out the priorities, had to attach some low priority to some of the items just for balance.
Thank you, Member Gordner, for those improvements. Members, any other comments or questions on the strategic plan? Seeing none, maybe we can move to the second half of this, which is convening executive session to discuss the executive director's annual performance review and proposed compensation adjustment. So is there a motion for the authority to convene an executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A2 to consider the hire, evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of an officer or employee, or of charge brought against the officer or employee where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved, provided that if the individual concerned requests an open meeting shall be held. Do I hear a motion to convene an executive session?
So moved, Debbie.
Thank you, Member Kabibi. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved by Member Kabibi and seconded by Member Evans. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. I request that we will be joined in executive session by Executive Director Craig Nakamoto, Chief Financial Officer Garrett Sasaki, Deputy Attorney General Kevin Tong, and HCDA staff members Lindsay Doi and Armaine Tamakdern. Board members and requested staff joining virtually, please click on the separate link provided in your Zoom chat. So if you go in the webinar chat, you'll click a separate link to join the executive session. And in-person members, there are none, so we won't ask them. But other staff that are not invited, please exit the boardroom and wait respectfully in the lobby until you're signaled to re-enter when the regular meeting reconvenes. Estimate that this executive session will last approximately 30 minutes. The time is now 10:50 a.m. And then the regular meeting is now back in session, and in the authorities executive session, the board members met under section 92-5A2 Hawaii revised statutes to consider and conduct the evaluation of the executive director. The executive director was excused during the discussion pertaining to his evaluation, and during the executive session, no decisions were made and no vote was taken. At the next meeting of the board, we will discuss the proposed performance evaluation and the proposed compensation adjustment. We'll move now to public testimony on this matter. Do we have any persons pre-signed up for testimony?
Oh, the time.
Oh, the time, sorry. When we reconvened was 11:21 a.m. Do we have any persons pre-signed up for testimony? Do we have any persons present or online who wish to provide testimony? Seeing no testimony, we'll move now to the report of the executive director, monthly report, and other status reports, including the monthly financial highlights for March 2025.
Thank you, Chair. Garrett Sasaki, the monthly financial highlights are in tab 4, and Garrett is available for any questions. Thank you.
Members, any comments or questions on the executive director's report?
Sure.
Please, Member Evans.
I noticed there doesn't appear to be transfers into the HEIA Community Development Special Fund. And it has a fund balance of $22,352. Is it contemplated that there will need to be transfers into the HEIA Community Development Special Fund to cover HEIA expenses over the next quarter?
No. The Heia district is leased to Kakoi EV.
Yeah.
This balance represents their lease
They have
rent.
a percentage rent component. It's very modest.
And that's what the balance is. There's no real expenses for the district. We're just accumulating this nominal amount.
And all expenses for the district would be paid by Cocoa OEB as part of their stewardship. They lease the entirety, all 400+ acres of the district. So they have a big mission, but they do a great job at taking care of it.
Sure, that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to public testimony. Do we have any persons pre-signed up for testimony? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Member
sorry,
Porter.
Chair, I did have one. I'm looking at Exhibit 5 of the report, the legislative appropriations. I do note that the supportive housing appropriation is lapsing on 6/30 according to this spreadsheet. It's the only appropriation not already encumbered. So I just wanted to confirm that that 5 million remaining allotment, that we are not in line to lapse that with the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, so this financials reflect up to March 31. The property closed on April, or,
April 29th.
sorry, am I off by timing? Yeah, this is March, so April 29th. That represents 3.8 million. Doing professional services for archaeological monitoring, few $100,000, and the balance will be used for additional improvements for supportive housing projects in the district.
Yeah.
To be encumbered by the end of next month.
Excellent, thank you.
So member Corner, it's not in danger of lapsing. We intend to encumber it all.
Thank you, members. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll open to public testimony. Anyone pre-signed up? Anyone wishing to testify in person or online? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony. Members, any final comments or questions before we adjourn the meeting? Seeing none, let's take a 9-minute break and reconvene, or a 4-minute break, and reconvene at 11:30 for the final meeting, the Kalailoa meeting. Thank you to those who joined us on Zoom or in person. This concludes our business for today. The meeting is adjourned. The time is now 11:26 a.m.
Thank you.